Oh, okay. Do I have to press start webinar though?
You can do that whenever you're ready, and by pressing start webinar, you will let the attendees in, and you will also start the recording.
Okay.
Is Victor here?
Let's check attendees.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
See him.
Yeah, let's see him. Hi, Richard.
Do you have your video on?
Do I? Yes.
Now we see you. I think she was referring to Vic. You are not seeing on yet.
Hey, George.
Hi, folks.
Hi, Paige. How are you? All right, let's just give everyone another minute to join. Oh, I see Vic is on. Great. Hi, how are you? Okay, how do we, for quorum, do we just need enough for one committee or two?
Yeah, it's the quorum of either committee, usually the host committee, that's sufficient.
For everyone.
Hi, Robert.
Hey, Robert,
Okay.
I don't even think we need a quorum if we're not taking a vote on something.
that's also correct.
Okay, well, so we have
Good
critical
point.
mass. I think we're there. All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Joint Housing and Land Use Committee meeting. I'm Melissa Rosenberg, a co-chair of Housing, joined by my fellow co-chairs. You want to introduce yourselves? Or not? Okay, Louisa Craddock, co-chair of Housing, Richard Ash and Jeanette Roush, co-chairs of Land Use. We're excited tonight to hear from Victor Bach about the NYCHA Preservation Trust and just talk some more about preservation of public housing in our district. So just quick ground rules. We'll hear from Vic, we'll hear from the committee, and then I think we'll be able to call on any attendees who have questions or comments. Just let's all please speak to each other respectfully. And please try to stay on mute when you're not speaking, just for background noise purposes. Any opening remarks, Richard or Jeanette, you want to make before I hand it off?
No, let's get to it.
Okay, Roberta, did you want to make a brief intro for Vic before we?
So Victor, we're delighted to have you here with us tonight.
Nice to be here.
For those of you who don't know Victor, he's the Senior Housing Policy Analyst at the Community Service Society, which has been working on poverty issues for over 175 years. Victor's work focuses on preserving the city's affordable housing resources, particularly public housing and Section 2. Over the years, we've worked with Victor on many NYCHA issues. He's been available, and it's always wonderful to hear what you have to say about what's happening with NYCHA. Thank you, Victor.
Okay, well, thanks for asking me. It's good to be back at Community Board 7. I think we all know how dire the situation at NYCHA is. I don't need to go into that. We know that it has a $40 billion capital backlog, that the residents are living in dire living conditions. Some of the buildings, I'm told, would be under a city vacate order if they were inspected by the city, but they are not. So the situation is beyond critical, and in a sense, the authority and all of us have an imperative to try to see that there's a plan to. Hold on a second. Hello? Hello? Sorry about that. That there's a plan in place to see that our public housing, 170,000 plus units, are preserved as low-income housing for the coming generation. John, I'm on a Zoom call. I can't do this. Sorry about that. Uh, um, So let me just briefly put the blueprint, the Preservation Trust, in perspective. In the last couple of years, NYCHA has come out with two major plans. In late 2018, it came out with Plan 2.0, which called for the conversion of 62,000 units, over a third of its housing stock, using the HUD RAD rental assistance demonstration program. RAD briefly requires that the under NYCHA's program requires that the development be transferred to private ownership and management under a long-term NYCHA lease. NYCHA continues to play a role in what it considers a public-private partnership, and the RAD program was enacted during the Obama administration as a way to bring in private capital into public housing that was starved for it. Then last summer, NYCHA came out with the blueprint, which proposed creating a preservation trust. This would be a state-created, state-legislated public benefit corporation built along the model of the School Construction Authority that would be charged with taking the remaining 110,000 units, those units that were not going to be improved through RAD, and it would undertake the capital reconstruction of those developments to restore decent living conditions. And let me try to explain briefly why this preservation trust, this new entity, seems to be needed. Under both RAD and under Section 18, which is another federal program for the disposition of public housing, it allows 1,000 housing authorities to shed some of their developments by transferring them to another party, another owner, and under the new owner, it is possible to raise capital from a variety of sources. The Preservation Trust model has several major selling points, I think. One is that it's a plan that's at scale. That is, it covers the entire inventory of public housing units. The remaining 110,000 would go through the Preservation Trust, under a long-term lease, the Preservation Trust would take over development by development for capital repair. That would be done under a federal program, an existing HUD program called Section 18. Under Section 18, the trust would be entitled to what are called tenant protection vouchers, which are a much richer rent stream than those that public housing ordinarily gets. It's about $600 a month more per unit that come with tenant protection vouchers. Under both programs, both RAD and Section 18, the federal requirement is that the property be transferred out of the authority to another owner. And it reflects the cynicism that Congress has about public housing as a whole. After a number of debacles, they much prefer funding Section 8 developments, which are privately owned and managed rather than trust public housing authorities. That's a given. Public housing is the least favored of federal housing programs in Congress. So both RAD and the Preservation Trust model require that in order to bring in the capital, the housing authority has to effectively transfer it to another owner under it can do it under a long-term lease, which is what NYCHA proposes, a 99-year lease. That once transferred, the Preservation Trust can tap tenant protection vouchers, which are receive a monthly subsidy based on the fair market rent levels rather than public housing subsidy levels. And the richer rent stream can be used to raise bonds that would enable the trust to undertake the capital repairs and restore conditions in those developments. One of the major pluses of the Preservation Trust model is that it avoids the privatization that occurs under RAD. The Preservation Trust itself would be a public entity, and the trust would then contract NYCHA to continue to carry out property management, which means that the public workforce remains in place rather than get displaced as it is under RAD. Another major advantage, apart from the tenant protection vouchers, is that the Preservation Trust would not be bound, as NYCHA is, by federal procurement regulations. It could take advantage of design build approaches to construction management and do a number of things that NYCHA does not presently have the capacity to do. It is said that if NYCHA got $40 billion over the next 10 years, that it does not have the capacity to carry out the capital development that's necessary. So this allows NYCHA to expand its capital capacity to carry out infrastructure improvements. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions you have. I'm trying to hit some of the high points. The blueprint has proved to be rather controversial among resident leaders, and for a number of reasons. For one, there's a good deal of justifiable anger and distrust of the housing authority to begin with, and of anything it plans to do. So, and there's some, again, well-deserved skepticism as to whether NYCHA can carry out a grand plan like the Preservation Trust. Secondly, a lot of resident leaders consider it a form of privatization. That's arguable. It's interesting because public housing, when it was first created, was financed by through local bond issues that were repaid by Washington annual capital contributions. And that's exactly the model that NYCHA proposes to use for the Preservation Trust. Any bond issuance would be backed by the value of the tenant protection vouchers that come with the development. Then there is a real process issue. That is, residents feel that this plan is being imposed on them, that they don't really have a seat at the table. As Alika Apri-Samuel, the chair of the City Council Public Housing Committee, said, NYCHA is very good at engaging residents once it's made a decision. The question is, I think there are real questions about process here And we've continued to push for more collaborative planning, as is happening now in the Chelsea neighborhood. And for residents to have a seat at the table and decide on what preservation strategies they prefer. And then finally, there's the issue of the pandemic. A lot of resident leaders, TA presidents, are tied up dealing with protecting tenants, dealing with providing services and assistance to vulnerable households and the like, and feel that this is just a bad time. Another issue is whether or not, given the election of President Biden, which I firmly believe in, there's some hope, some light at the end of the tunnel, that Washington will come through without going through the somersaults of the RAD conversion process or the preservation trust process. And that's an open question. So if indeed residents had a seat at the table and could opt for their choice of preservation strategy, really they have three options right now, to put it simply. One is to go through a RAD conversion. Secondly, to go through a more public preservation trust conversion. Or thirdly, to wait for Washington, Albany, or City Hall to come through with the capital that's needed. And those seem to be the options available to NYCHA and to resident leadership. And the question is where you put your chips in terms of what's the best option for your development. We think the preservation trust model is a good idea. It preserves the public nature of public housing, although another issue for residents is that they would no longer be public housing residents. Their developments would be transferred from Section 9, which is federal public housing, to Section 8. And that seems to be a kind of identity issue. And it's crucial that in any of these transfers, that the rights and protections that public housing residents now enjoy be sustained through conversion. And there have been a number of attempts to assure that. A number of us have proposed changes in the legislation that NYCHA has sent to Albany to see that that happens and the like. And I can go on, but I think it might be a good idea to just sit back and answer questions.
I just saw one question coming from Carmen, who's a NYCHA resident leader. How does resident management potentially fit into one or all of these options?
Well, I think that's a decision that that has to be made by both residents and NYCHA. It does require some lead time. It requires training of resident leaders to undertake management responsibilities. Unfortunately, a number of the resident management corporations that have emerged across the country in the last, I would say 50 years, none of them have survived intact. It's not an easy thing to do, in my view, and it has to be done carefully and thoroughly. I think that's an issue that should come up and be dealt with development by development. It may well be that the best idea, and this I'm just speculating, would be to undergo conversion, get your capital improvements, and then talk about a management shift and what needs to be done. But I think it's very difficult to do both at the same time, both the capital work and the shift to resident management, if residents desire to take it on.
Thank you. Madeline, do you wanna jump in?
I'm sorry, did you recognize me?
Hi,
Hi.
Ethel.
Victor, how are you? Hi, good to see you. I just, I was following some of this via some of the conversations and discussions at the Citizens Housing Planning Council, because they've been tracking this also. But so to be, some of the points that were made, and I was far from an expert, was that in general, not enough real cultivation and outreach to the residents has been occurring on the part of the government, on the part of others, in order to be able to help make this happen. And so so that is needed, that there really has to be, to begin with, the collaboration with the
Right.
residents. So is that, I mean, that's just kind of, given this model or this hope, is that a threshold point at least?
Well, that's an important point, because given the pandemic, it's very difficult to engage
Right.
residents. And a lot of residents don't have the digital capacity to be engaged. That's one of the reasons a number of us think NYCHA ought to pause, at least for a while, and do more collaborative and engagement work before moving forward with the blueprint. I believe NYCHA's mindset is that the situation is critical enough that they feel they have to move forward.
So I'm sorry, could NYCHA move forward in a model or something that could begin to approach these needs and processes that would not require legislation? Because if you need the legislation, I mean, I'm just wondering, who knows when legislation would occur? So, but some of the values and structures, could they not go forward without the legislation, which may be delayed and so on, and yet begin to embody some of these good features that you've described?
Yeah, well, NYCHA may have a plan B, that would
Okay.
involve not the creation of a state chartered preservation trust,
Oh, I see.
but the creation of a special nonprofit that would take on pretty much the same responsibilities. I don't know if they're prepared to move forward with that. I think they'd much prefer to do it under a state chartered trust. But you're right, and particularly given some of the resident resistance, it's not clear that many legislators will, at this point, support the trust.
So the idea, so then with the resistance and the difficulties, it might not go forward, but maybe some model and the not-for-profit could make it go forward. But so the outreach to the residents is essential no matter what.
Right, and in any case, the outreach and the collaboration is essential.
Right, right. Thanks.
Madeline, why don't you go?
Okay. Hi, Victor. How are you?
Hey,
Happy New Year and all those good things.
hi, Madeline.
But I want to address this more broadly. There's many issues. We have repairs, lack of apartments for seniors. We have all those difficulties. But do you think broadly, we have a new administration, we're planning to address all these issues we have been addressing for decades, but we've had 5 chairs of NYCHA, each one worse than the other. My thing is that each development should get together and put their list of problems, and somehow we could research the monies that is needed for each development rather than NYCHA coming to us and telling us what, because we live here. Like you said, we should have more of a say so. What do you think? Should we address it with the new administration, or keep nitpicking these little band-aids that we haven't gotten accomplished in decades?
Right. Well, a couple of things. We're involved in at least 2 coalitions that are calling for the next mayor to come up with an integrated housing plan that includes not only private affordable housing, but NYCHA as well, and planning for address homelessness and the like. So I think there's some pressure on the candidates right now to start thinking in that way. but secondly, I wanted to point to an example. I mentioned the Chelsea Working Group, and that's a new precedent-setting approach to planning for preservation on NYCHA's part. I don't know if you remember in the summer of, I think it was 2019, NYCHA came up with a plan for preserving Fulton houses. Does anyone remember that?
Yes, yes.
It involved RAD conversion of the existing development. It involved residential infill construction to generate some of the capital revenue. And it involved the demolition of a couple of the low-rise buildings in order to make room for the infill construction. There was a good deal of vocal resistance to it. And as a result of the turmoil that occurred around NYCHA's announcement of the plan, the mayor was pressed to form the Chelsea Working Group. And it's been a remarkable experience. The group includes resident leaders from the 3 public housing developments in Chelsea. It includes representation of every elected official that represents the district. It includes several housing advocacy groups and resource groups like CSS, Legal Aid, and a number of others there for technical assistance. And the group started working in late 2019. We had to pause in April because of the pandemic. And then we started working again in the early fall using virtual technology. In the next couple of weeks, the report of the working group will be coming out with a preservation plan that has no demolition, that has a rather exhaustive list of resident rights and protections, and a number of innovative approaches to resident engagement in the process. And I'm hoping it sets a precedent for the kind of planning that you're talking about that NYCHA should be doing with residents at every development. The problem, of course, is that it's time consuming and labor consuming. We met like, I don't know how many weeks on every Tuesday and Thursday evening. And it's a lot of work, but it was very productive because a lot of resident leaders who initially, for instance, were vigorously opposed to RAD conversion, we sort of mutually educated each other, and they understood what it had to offer and why it would be useful, provided that it came with the right protections and with a strong resident engagement component. So a number of our minds were changed, and there was a consensus, and this will be the first kind of community-generated plan for preservation. And I hope it does set a precedent for the future. So hang on that score.
Ask just a quick question about the group's like functioning. So NYCHA was at the table for those discussions and actively
involved? Yes,
Yes,
NYCHA staff were also included. Greg Russ came to a number of meetings. Vicky Bean came. The borough president was there, and representation from every elected official. Yeah, Robert.
Yeah. An article was circulated within the past week, and I don't recall who it came from. It was sent to the Housing Committee. It might have been Roberta. And that the article focused on a development, a NYCHA development. I think it was Washington Heights, north of Manhattan at least. And that the contract they went into with the developer for the complete renovation of the apartments and the floors, windows, appliances, the works. And they went in there, with a camera crew and so on. They interviewed the property management and a couple of tenants. all of whom, of course, you know, there's selection, but I'll make my point, were pleased beyond themselves with the collaboration with this private sector to improve their lot. And their rationale was, you know, they've had it. They've just couldn't take any more. And of course, I'm even going to make the assumption by what I know about that part of the city that that NYCHA development wasn't nearly in the condition that many other NYCHA developments are around the city, which are really horror stories.
Right.
So they were quite happy. And here's my point. It seems to me that while RAD is a good program, and by the way, I didn't hear RAD in association with that report. So there might be couple of different models floating around that NYCHA is entertaining and that the tenant associations may have a choice of in making their decisions. So it seems to me, and I think this is workable, and it certainly would move the thing along because RAD, as good as it may be, may take forever. And time is really of the essence. So if we had different models where each of the developments can choose, this is how I want to go, or we have a plurality of the votes and the tenant association or so on, and that we choose we're going to privatize or semi-privatize in this way with the guarantee that we're going to remain affordable, that it isn't a question that we're going to get into a 10-year deal and all of a sudden our rent is going to treble. No. And that's a model that's been taking a little while to mature. People would ask, well, why would any private developer enter into this affordable housing thing where they can get, and of course, I happen to be a realtor. So we work with tax credit programs, and that's how you fund these things. Big time. So in other words, a tax credit program, for those who are not familiar with it, tells the billionaire, look, instead of hiding your money in the Cayman Islands, put it here, and I'm the IRS, and I'm going to give you credit on that, you know, and then you just, there's millions of dollars to put into affordable housing construction and preservation. So that I like that model of the diverse methods of improving the conditions in NYCHA. And this, I think, was a perfectly timed article, and it was truthful, I think, and I trust it and I believe it. And what you have, Victor, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think
On that diversity of solutions.
There's some research that's been done and some testimony by residents who've gone through RAD conversion. This was the purpose of the Obama RAD legislation, was to provide the capital to make the improvements. A lot of them seem to be quite satisfied with the changes. There's a lot of suspicion of private ownership and management. A lot of residents fear that ultimately it's going to lead to gentrification and displacement. There is also a lot of misinformation. The legislation for RAD requires that the affordability be renewed every 20 years. It's not like Mitchell-Lama, where after 20 years, the owner is allowed to go to market. That's not the situation. So there are, and if you embed the right resident protections and guarantees, then you have a workable situation. Of course, it's possible that at some point NYCHA might choose a bad contractor, a bad developer, but so far the experience seems to be positive for most residents.
Okay, great, thanks. So then that particular one, even if I don't remember it, so that would have been a RAD model?
I don't know the development you're referring to, but I assume it's part of the Manhattan RAD bundle.
Okay.
It's interesting, by the way, that in Chelsea, the question was whether or not residents wanted to go forward with RAD or the Section 18 model, or wait for Washington to come through. Oh, wait, the question was whether they wanted to go through ULURP. And the resident leadership said, no, we don't want to delay this any longer. As you indicated, they wanted the improvements as rapidly as possible, and they opted for RAD.
I don't want to extend this in my time, but if I may just add a little closing question. I agree. Why Euler? This is existing development. We're not talking about adding a new development, the thing that we battled a couple of years ago within the NYCHA property. And it's renovations. So why Euler? Yeah. So I agree with that kind of opposition. And it's just
it was a pragmatic decision that they wanted to go forward with this preservation strategy rather than delay it, even with a community process.
Right. Okay, Victor, thank you.
Robert, if you don't mind digging up the article and sharing it with the committee, I think it would.
I'll
be
look for it. Yes, and I
helpful
will. I
context.
certainly will. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Paige, you've had your hand up for a while.
Paige?
Thank you. Mr. Block, it's an honor to have you tonight. I have two tiny questions because I get confused because this has gone on so long. But of the three options that you mentioned, RAD, Section 18, or the federal government intervening, which one in your mind has the greatest promise of success, accurate scheduling, and honesty of the construction process? And my second question is, because it's related to those, is why aren't we hearing more about neighborhoods actually getting behind our electeds to push this through? I've been on the community board for 16 years, it seems, maybe 15, and we're going in circles. I'd love to hear what you think our community should do to push this along. Thank you.
What page? Just if I
Well,
can
to answer your second question first, I think, and you have strong relationships with your resident leaders in public housing. I think you need to get with them and put together maybe some sort of resolution that reflects the common consensus about where things should go in terms of NYCHA. But secondly, in terms of the three options, I have to be clear that I'm not in the business of promoting RAD or the Preservation Trust or waiting for Washington, if you will. I'm in the business of supporting residents being part of the process through which those decisions are made, however they're made and whichever option they prefer. So I don't think anything ought to go forward if it doesn't have the consensus of residents. I would prefer personally that Washington come through. There are a number of bills on the books. AOC has a Green New Deal for public housing. Nydia Velasquez has a bill for 70 billion for public housing. Maxine Waters has one. And the Democrats for a long time in Congress have had a blueprint an infrastructure blueprint that includes $70 billion for public housing nationally. The question is a practical one. Is Washington going to be able to come through right now? They're now in the process of dealing with a major COVID economic rescue bill at about $2 trillion. There are a number of demands being made. I'm not sure how much the public housing infrastructure issue is going to get quick consideration, given all of the demands being made of the federal government at this moment, and the potential for some gridlock in Congress. I think the Democrats have their hearts in the right place, but I'm not sure how much they'll be able to produce. And certainly, I think the COVID issues, COVID-related issues, come first.
Can I just ask a PS to my question quickly? Is of the three options available, I agree with you. The federal one seems to be the best because that's the
Ideally,
flood.
yes,
Um,
ideally.
yeah,
Because it doesn't require any kind of shift in the nature of public housing. It just
Correct.
requires a capital.
I agree. The only question then remains is how do we mobilize and help the tenants so that there's equity and uniformity in the quality of the housing that they're given.
Well, you've got to
That's for
work with
another,
them.
it's not
work
for
with
tonight, but that's your next part two when you come back, helping us try to sort out the
Okay,
details. Thank you so much.
okay, my pleasure.
I'll mute.
Okay, are we
So
done?
next, Jeanette, and I encourage attendees who wish to ask a question or make a comment, especially those who are actually residents of public housing, please raise your hand and I'll be happy to call on you. Sorry, Jeanette, go on.
Yes, between the three alternatives, it seems to me that we really should be pursuing all three at the same time. We'd all love for Washington to come through with a lot of money, but they haven't for 50 years. And so I think just sitting back and waiting for that doesn't really help us. But pursuing either of the other two options doesn't mean we should stop asking or trying to get more money. The Section 18 and creating the trust seems to me to be much better than the RAD that privatizes the public housing. It keeps it at least in a public entity. I'd be curious, how are the appointees on the Public Benefit Corporation made? Are they including residents as part of that?
Yes.
And then from what I understand, a lot of focus on the tenant outreach that the commissioner has been doing, or the questions are all like about them moving during the construction. And I think the hardest part is that NYCHA has had such a bad track record with the residents that why should they believe anything that NYCHA proposes? And the best thing would be if, while NYCHA is pursuing all these things, it could have some more short-term actions that are addressing the immediate problems and start to create a track record that shows that it is putting its best effort forward. And so I'm wondering if what's happening in the meantime while we lobby for the state to create this new entity, and NYCHA put together the entity and who's representing the trust fund, the benefit corporation rather.
Certainly, I think NYCHA has to slow down a little. It has to be done at the pace of resident trust, building resident trust. Because without that, there's not going to be any kind of consensus on how to go about preserving our public housing. And so I would suggest that if NYCHA comes knocking at the doors of any of your developments with a plan that you propose to you and the resident leadership, if you're working with them with Polly or Madeline or Cynthia, that you come together with NYCHA, with some neutral advocacy organizations and your electeds, and start from scratch and look at all of the options and understand them as well as you can, and then put together a community-generated plan for preservation of the developments in your district.
Yeah. I just, sorry to pause calling on the committee. If there are attendees who want to ask a question, I think they can raise their hands, right, Mark? Sorry, I know
Yes,
I see
absolutely.
others have their hands up, but I hope you'll humor me and allow some of the NYCHA tenants to ask a question first, if that's okay. Okay, Cynthia, you should be able to unmute and talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to just follow back on what Vic was saying. Number one, The working group was only put into place when it came down to Fulton because there was so much pushback on them being put into the infill program. If there was a working group when they did the Manhattan Bundle B, maybe Wise would have had more of a vocal output on what happened to them. Recently, they had a major fire over there, and because PRC management is now in charge of them, they're supposed to have an on-site super. There was over 100 firefighters on the scene and no PRC super. He refused to answer Vic Ernesto, who was the president at Wise. He never answered his phone calls. It wasn't until Gail Brewer got over there and helped Ernesto assist in getting residents out of the building that PRC decided to respond. Why did this happen? Because they rushed the bundle through during COVID without much input from the residents. This is what happens. As far as the blueprint goes, presidents have been asking Gregory Russ to give us a copy of the plan in detail. We have yet to receive it. They made sure to give it to all the senators when they had their meeting, and they only got it a couple of days prior to the meeting. The City Council of Presidents, Danny Barber, has been very strong, as most of us presidents have been, that we are against the blueprint as it is and how it stands right now. If we cannot trust NYCHA to manage the 30 million they're given on a weekly basis to handle repairs, why would we trust them to be put back into managing a public trust, which for every apartment that a voucher is deemed into the program, they are awarded like 5 times amount what the value of the apartment is. So why would you trust someone who has mismanaged funds for decades, where the public trust has a stipulation that NYCHA is put right back into the same position where they still are going to be mismanaging our funds? If they can't tell us where the money goes now, what makes you think we can trust them to tell us where the money goes in the blueprint program? We also do not get, they have never given Section 3 the resignation is supposed to get under Section 9. It's never going to get the same resignation under Section 8. Just because Ocean Bay had maybe a handful of residents put into the Section 3 program is nothing. 3 people is nothing. That's what they'll do. They say, okay, we made our commitment to the Section 3 program, and we have approximately 3 to 5 residents, when that is ridiculous. That is.
Cynthia, can I ask you what you would propose?
As far as what?
As far as preserving your development and other developments in the community?
I would suggest a bigger roundtable of presidents and residents involved. That is currently not happening under Pact and RAD. They have silenced the presidents. They did during the Manhattan B bundle.
You mean something on the order of the Chelsea Working Group?
Yeah, that should have been put in place since day one.
Well, we hope it's going to happen more often than in Chelsea.
Right, but how do we know when that's not written in the plans as it stands right now? Greg
Well,
Russ.
I think that's something we all have to press for.
Exactly, and
Mhm.
if it should happen, we have, listen, Occupy NYCHA has met with Greg Russ on a bunch of occasions. He told us to our face that he would be stepping down as soon as the mayor stepped down, that he was only here as long as de Blasio is here. On Inside on Errol Lewis's City Hall, he said he will be staying on with the new administration. Gregory Russ has a history of lying. All right, he looks at you right in the eye, Vic, and lies. So
yeah, well, it turns out that that any appointment of a new NYCHA chair requires not only a mayor appointment, but it requires HUD approval and approval of the Southern District of New York under the HUD New York City agreement.
I get all that, but
okay.
What,
Yeah, and I did see the Era Lewis thing, and he did say that, that he might be staying on. I don't know what he really thinks.
definitely is staying on. I watched the whole thing live.
Right.
He said he's definitely staying on. Our thing is this. We can't trust them to tell us and be 100% transparent with us. NYCHA has never been transparent with residents, much less the leaders of the residents. They have a history of neglect, no transparency, no accountability. So why would we trust them with the blueprint?
The question is where we go from here. If the capital came from Washington, who would be in charge?
The
of using it?
residents have a say,
No, the capital would go through the housing authority. So
right?
you
But
would still be dealing with NYCHA capital projects. You'd still be dealing with NYCHA management. If you have a problem with NYCHA, then I think that's an issue that we all have to deal with and be concerned about. But
the way
I would strongly suggest that you act proactively. Maybe once the Chelsea working group report comes out, demand that you set up a similar working group on the Upper West Side to do the same, to develop a preservation plan for the remaining developments and bring together all of the necessary actors to do the work and decide on a community generated plan.
and I have no
I think the
problem,
sooner the better.
would prefer to do that, but NYCHA has a way of excluding people. And the only way our voices ever get heard is when we force it on them through the media. So if we have to do that, I have no problem doing it. But
Right. Well, I mean, the Chelsea group took some pressure from the electeds, okay, on the mayor to actually approve and form the working group. So I think if you can get to your electeds, I mean, Gail knows the score, and so do many of the others, and get to them and see if you can put pressure on the mayor to develop a community generated plan on the order of the Chelsea model.
okay,
Okay, so I'm gonna switch back to committee. Richard, sorry, you've had to wait a while.
Yes. Many of the questions I had were asked, particularly by Paige, but I'm curious. My view is that there's no downside to pressing the legislature as quickly as possible to pass the Preservation Trust legislation. I think, and I'd be curious to get your sense of the politics, but my guess is that the only way it has a chance of passing is if it has tenant pressure behind it. And so that's another reason for forming, whether we call it a community group or whatever it is, we need to have the support of tenants if they approve of this before anything's going to happen in the legislature. Is there any city other than New York City that would be involved in this?
That has a similar model?
That would be covered by the Preservation Trust model.
No, this would be a New York
Okay.
City approach.
And is there any cost to the state in this, or is it all
I don't
bondholders?
believe so, other than whatever it costs them to oversee the trust.
Final question. You mentioned a plan B, forming a nonprofit corporation to take over NYCHA's. Can a nonprofit corporation issue bonds?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. It's
If it's
very.
Depending on the charter. Yeah.
And, okay, is there a way? Can we get access to the bill? Is it in a form?
Yes. I can send you a copy of the legislation that was proposed last December. It's being changed. It's being revised.
It's a start, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could send it to the office, that'd be great.
Sure.
Great, Roberta?
Thanks so much, Victor. A couple of first of all, we were going to set up something with the community prior to the pandemic, and of course couldn't proceed because of the pandemic. But I think the task force and the board is very committed to working with the Fred Douglass and Amsterdam houses, as well as ongoing relationship with Wise Towers. So this legislation, if it passed, you think the state would be willing to pass it? Well, there's possibility that the federal government may step up to the plate.
I can't predict what our legislators will do. I know that some degree of resident support will be necessary. Some degree of constituent support will be necessary to convince legislators. I think there will probably be further hearings. NYCHA is continuing to engage residents and inform them about the ideas and so on, and what the pros and cons are. But I personally think that it would be foolish to expect a fast response from Washington, given the situation. I think that that's going to take some time and some doing. And one of the useful things about the Preservation Trust is that, in my view, it's a worst case strategy. It was designed during the Trump presidency, assuming not only no rescue from Washington, but more trouble from Washington. And it can be carried out without Washington. And so if Washington comes through, as someone said before, NYCHA can begin to use capital coming from Washington and add it to whatever it's doing through the trust. But the trust is NYCHA's fallback position for restoring decent conditions at all of its developments, regardless of whether Washington comes through.
So is there a way of putting pressure then on both Washington and the state?
Well, I'm certain that our delegation, maybe except for Staten Island, would all be in favor of the $70 billion for public housing, whether that's part of the infrastructure package or Nydia's bill or AOC's bill and so on. So we don't have a problem with our delegation. The problem is with Congress as a whole.
Thank you.
And we don't have, except in our work with national organizations, we don't have a way to apply pressure to other Congress people.
Going to need 60 senators.
Yeah.
Okay, Madge.
Has anything positive come out of RAD that could be used even in the short term till this decision is made, that can be used to improve the situation, which is so bad right now? Have we learned anything from RAD?
A number of residents from converted developments have testified in favor of RAD, prepared to say what it's meant to them to have those kinds of improvements, to even complement the management that they have, the private management firms that have taken them over. But I think the
specifics.
The resident leadership as a whole is not convinced. And there's a lot of misinformation floating around about eviction rates, about gentrification and displacement, and a lot of justifiable fears. So the question is how to cut through that and build the kind of trust that's needed to develop a kind of consensus around a preservation strategy. And I think that's what we managed to do in Chelsea.
I think Seema. has a question.
Hi, I have two questions, one specific one and one a little bit more general. We must be a year ago now, had someone from RPA come talk to us about their proposals for how to address the $40 billion shortfall in NYCHA funding. And, you know, some if not most of their proposed solutions were quite alarming to us, some of which were specifically sort of geared toward the developments in our district. I'm wondering how that's perceived, both like on the NYCHA level and also on your level, like the community, number one. And number two, I'm more generally curious about how NYCHA sort of incorporates these sort of think tank pieces, and if there comes a point at which the shortfall is so severe and conditions are so bad that NYCHA just takes sort of peremptory action without consulting tenants and stakeholders.
I think that's where things are, unfortunately. If I recall the RPA proposals, they emphasize the transfer of development rights.
Yes, that's right.
And
also infill development was the other big
right,
thing.
Right. That they felt that these were necessary strategies for NYCHA to generate the capital it needs in order to undertake restoration. I think that there's nothing wrong with those approaches per se. They provided that they're done with resident and community consent.
Absolutely.
Huh?
Yes, totally agree. It doesn't seem like though there's been any sort of that second sort of bridge to outreach to the community to get anyone on board though.
Right.
At least from what I've heard.
Right. These are all ingredients in a preservation strategy that should be considered, and until a consensus decision is made as to which to use.
Got it.
Sorry, Louisa, apparently you had your hand up physically and I missed it.
Yes,
I apologize.
thank you. Okay, I was wondering, first of all, thank you very much because you've made this much clearer to me, but I'm still confused. So, say that the state passes the legislation for the Preservation Trust. So you have 110,000 units that haven't been placed in RAD. Do all of those get placed in the Preservation Trust, or who would select? Do the residents select? Who selects which buildings will be subject to the trust?
Well, it would be done over a 10-year period, so that's about 10,000, 11,000 units a year. And right now it's NYCHA who decides which developments are in the pipeline when. But the idea behind the Preservation Trust is to cover the entire public housing inventory over 10 years.
That would include the buildings that are already subject to RAD?
No, those are the 62,000 would go through the RAD pipeline. Those are still being selected. And the remaining 110,000 would go through the trust.
Okay, and how do they interact? How will they interact? Will they use the same suppliers?
I don't
Have the same
think
rules?
so. I think each, the construction would be carried out by individual contractors in each case, development by development. And again, I think residents ought to have a voice in the selection of contractors and the like. But the question, I think, is a good one for residents. We're going to have, if all of this happens over the next 10 years, we're going to have some developments that have been converted under RAD. We're going to have some developments that are being converted under the trust. And we're going to have lingering developments that are still under NYCHA ownership and direct NYCHA ownership and management. And I think for residents, the crucial question of how do they all come together and retain their identity as public housing residents and act as a coordinated entity. That's an identity issue that's very important for residents to think about, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to quickly pose a few questions that someone asked in the Q&A, which I thought were really good ones. So one is that, are there any red flags associated with skirting procurement regulations associated with the trust process? So you described how they use design builds and there's other benefits. Are there any concerns?
We registered some of those concerns in our testimony, which I sent to Roberta on the legislation. The question
I sent that around to both committees.
Yeah. But the questions about whether or not the legislation that currently exists adequately carries along the resident rights and protections that are currently enjoyed by public housing residents, and a number of other issues that get into the details of the legislation. But overall, I think right now the question is the overall concept, and whether the concept is sound. Ideally, if it does get passed, hopefully the legislation will be hammered through with all of the necessary protective clauses included.
Great. Okay, so we should
I think they need to do a lot of work in terms of mechanisms of accountability, transparency, and the like. When and where they conduct hearings on development plans and the like, that I think is a critical need.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think is anyone else's have questions? Polly, I don't think you've had a chance. Why don't you go ahead?
Hi, good evening, Victor. I'm so happy to see you, and it's been a while. And I'm not going to rehash everything that everyone's already said because we've been dealing with this issue. I know I have for over a decade, okay, lots of meetings. I agree with you that we as resident leaders here on the Upper West Side need to come together, okay, and draft our own preservation plan. That's truly key, all right? To me, this public trust is just another rebranding because I don't care how much capital funds we get from the federal government or outside entities. Again, if there's no accountability, no transparency, when it comes to the work that's being done, and that's a problem. That has always been a problem, shoddy work. In my personal opinion, I feel that the contractors that they hire, are third rate. Okay, they're not supervised, they're not monitored, there's no accountability whatsoever. So
You're
it's just a
by the way, one of the virtues of the trust is that they don't have to observe federal procurement regulations the way NYCHA
exactly does. So there you go. So it'll just, to me, just be another pipeline for money to pass through the agency again, okay, be mismanaged again, and we the residents are the ones who will suffer again. What I would like to see is a solution, because a lot of us as resident associations have our own 501c nonprofit corporations. So each campus and complex is different. So I feel depending on that site, if you have resident leaders and residents who are willing to manage their own complexes, then I feel they should be recognized as partners as they're supposed to be under 964 regs, okay? Sit down at the table, draft a plan that works for that specific campus because they're all different, okay? And you don't, as far as I'm concerned, that's not really looked at as an option. We've been talking about this for years, okay? To have our own resident council management, okay? We're already doing the work. We're already managing the buildings when it comes to heating, lighting, repairs, etc. So it's not like we're inexperienced, all right? And if we had to get training, we could. So that's the issue. So any state legislative document that's passed, that needs to be crafted into that document.
Right.
And then, yeah, as a resident, that to me is the best solution. We have corporations. I'm quite sure that would partner with us as 501c nonprofit corporations, okay? And then we could come up with our own solutions. We do have solutions, but again, as has been said earlier, it's not recognized.
Right. Well, then, Polly, under the legislation, it would be important to include provisions. Right now, the Preservation Trust will contract NYCHA to do the management. So I think it needs to include provisions for transition to resident management.
And I agree with you. And we need,
Opted for.
yeah, we need to speak to our elected officials on the state level and have them, help us to make that happen.
Right.
Because I mean, we're constantly talking and having discussions, and it's time for, real actions. Okay. This conversation regarding NYCHA and the issues and the deterioration of the buildings, it's been going on for too long. And it's just a rebranding every 10 years or every decade.
Right.
Now we're talking about RAD and PAC, and yes, Ocean Bay, Compost Plaza, the residents are happy there. I've seen those sites. I think they're wonderful. Okay. And that works for those campuses. But we have, again, resident leaders who are more than capable of managing, the
Right.
buildings, because they're already doing the work. So I
Right.
feel that we need to reach out to
Right.
our state legislative officials and really have them sit down and craft a document that's going to protect us, and also have that included in the public trust.
Right. Right. I think, I understand resident complaints about NYCHA, about conditions, justifiable completely. But I think it's important to put your energy into proactive proposals.
And I agree with you. Totally agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Kimberly, I see you've been writing in the chat. I can allow you to talk, but are your remarks related to Vic Bach's presentation, or are they more general? Because if they are more general, we'll wait and address them after he leaves.
They are more general. Yeah, I'm a tenant in 100 Freedom Place South. We didn't know the focus of the meeting tonight,
Okay.
but we've been starting to try to organize because we've been having some serious issues in the building, as the last building that was approved as a building with a poor door, and things have become quite unmanageable. So if you want me to wait, that's fine.
Yeah, sorry if you don't mind, but
No
we would like to hear from you. Okay, I think Richard, you have a follow-up question, and then
quick, if you can, Vic, can you give us a sense of the timetable in Albany? Is there a bill that's been registered? Are there hearings, further hearings proposed? What is a realistic timetable that we have to work with so we can get our lobbying done?
Well, NYCHA did send a bill to Albany, which was introduced and the hearings were held last December. The bill
December
is
2019?
Yeah, December 2020.
Oh, recently.
Oh.
And I did again send Roberta our testimony with legal aid on the bill itself, and I will send the bill. I understand that's being changed in light of the hearing. My sense is that NYCHA would like to see it pass this legislative session.
So we have to act fast.
Which would be after April.
Thanks.
Whether that's realistic or not, I don't know at this point.
Great. Okay, I think if there's no more questions for Vic, we
Roberta has.
And
okay, sure, Roberta, if you have another follow-up question.
Is this state legislation, is the legislation specific to New York City, or is it for public housing throughout the state?
It's specific to New York City.
And then if I could just clarify, the question I had asked before was who appoints the members of the new trust? Usually it's the governor and the mayor appoint people, but on this trust that would become the new sort of governing entity, will there be resident representatives there?
Yeah, I think half of the board is appointed by NYCHA, half by the mayor. And there would be, each of them is required to appoint 2 residents. So there would be a total of 4 residents on the Preservation Trust Board, and I think 9 directors on the board. There is pressure, and I think it's justifiable, to have an elected residents on the board, rather than those that are filtered through the mayor and NYCHA, but to actually have residents elect members of the board. I personally think it's a good idea.
Great. Any other last questions? If you're physically raising your hand, please just jump in because I cannot see it.
Just want to thank Victor. This is a very enlightening presentation and very helpful.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Melissa, Carmen put in chat that she has her hand up. I don't actually see it on the list, but maybe we
Yeah.
can take it off the chat.
If Victor legislation to me, I'll be glad to send it to everybody.
Okay, yeah, Victor, if you don't mind taking one more question, Carmen, I've allowed you
No,
to
it's fine.
talk.
Hi, Victor. It's been a while since I've seen you. Thank you for.
Hey, Carmen, how are you?
Thank you for always being in the fight. First of all, we definitely Occupy NYCHA is made up of 10 different presidents and 10 different developments, and we are all looking into resident management. We have a lot of CBOs in our district, especially here on the Upper West Side, and I believe that our CBOs need to be a part of resident management. We've been doing it on our own. NYCHA has never kept their end of the bargain. As you know, Vic, they can't even account for, the money that the federal government has been giving them. Even the monitor has not gotten answers to that. We cannot go through this again with trusting New York City Housing Authority to do anything for us. We've been doing this now for years, the names only change, but it's still the same game. And until we really change New York City Housing Authority's officials from the mayor on up has to go. We keep the same people there that have been stealing money. The corruption is big. And until that changes, nothing will change. And that is why a lot of our presidents are saying now, no, we need to do our own thing, because we've been doing it. We've been managing these buildings. We've been doing the work. So resident management is the only way to go. Here on the Upper West Side, we have so many CBOs that are capable of partnering with us, that are willing to partner with us. Why don't we do that? Keep it home. We don't need private entities from everywhere else to come in here. No, we are well set, especially here on the Upper West Side, to have our CBOs become partners with us. So, I wanted to really thank you, because you've been in this fight a long time. And you say you're not pushing the blueprint, but every time you get a minute, you do. But the blueprint and the RAD.
I like the idea.
Okay, well, and that's your prerogative, right? But as long as they don't put the presidents on the table, if we're not included in this discussion, we have nothing to say to you. We're tired. I mean, we're up 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Even last night I had 3 leaks in 868. I didn't go to sleep till 5 in the morning.
Right.
For real. I don't get paid for this. But meanwhile, Greg Russell's making $400,000. Come on now. When is this going to change?
Right.
In our last meeting, Vic, they talked about now they want to put more staff on. So you want to pay more staff, take that money and put it into the repairs that are needed. Why do you want to pay some more staff instead of putting the money in where it belongs? And that is in repairs.
I think they're trying to clear work orders.
Honey, the work orders, don't
They're
even get me on
clear
work
orders. Yeah.
The work orders are closed way before anybody gets repairs. So we know what's it. Again, it needs the thing that we need to talk about and we need to do is revamping New York City Housing Authority from the top on down. What they
Right.
do is they move people from place to place. That's it. They don't get rid of them. So the same corporates are there that have been stealing money for ages and years. So it's never going to change, and we cannot trust it.
Right.
We
Well,
cannot trust it.
I think it's important to get your ideas about resident management incorporated in the state legislation.
We
As you
have
can
been
tell-
doing that. I just wrote a letter even to the Daily News the day before yesterday with the article that they came out with. I talked about I wrote them on that article. I am meeting with Eric Adams tomorrow. I just sent him a letter on what we're thinking about resident management and if he's going to be down. Oh, we're hitting these legislators. And that's what we have to do. The elected officials are not going to do anything until everybody gets elected. They're scared of the presidents and what we're saying. They are scared. They are not going to vote on this until they get elected. Smart. But I want to thank you for all you do.
Good to see you, Carmen.
Likewise.
Okay, if you don't mind taking one more, Victor Gonzalez, another tenant leaner, has his hand raised.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. So the only problem that I'm currently having is I hear everybody said that the residents aren't being contacted with the conversion. I can tell you that that is so far from the truth that it's ridiculous. And there were other organizations standing in our way, spreading misinformation in the Upper West Side with regards to that. And I can attest to it because I am a resident that lives in one of the buildings that just converted on December 1st. In 2019, way before COVID, we had 7 meetings where they did evening meetings for people that work, day meetings for people that can make the day meetings in various locations. The TA president did it at Wise. Goddard Riverside had 3 of them. And then I think there was another place. So I don't understand where this misinformation is coming from that they're not contacting the residents. Okay, they gave us information. They told us who to contact in legal aid before you signed your lease, if you were going to go that way. And Victor, what you mentioned before, that was the real, true voluntary conversion back in 2019 and into the early 2000s, because then they actually gave the residents a choice. You either go here or you just stay, a NYCHA resident. That's not happening now. So that word, voluntary conversion, is a real bad depiction that's in that blueprint, okay? Because there's nothing voluntary about it. What it is here it is, and these are your 3 choices. So again, I don't understand why they're saying that no one is contacting these residents. I can tell you I was up in Matanzas when they were just transforming, and I'm going 3 Christmases ago, and I was there. I was there and watched them. They had this big celebration for the holidays, and everybody was hunky-dory, playing folkloric music and carrying on. So again, I don't know where this information is coming from. I don't know if it's dissatisfied residents that don't know where to get the information, even though it's being presented. So at that point, I'll leave that. And I don't have the time to start from 1988 is when all of this started going down the toilet. That's when the authority started, the federal government started taking away monies from the authority every year, constantly. Every year, more money started going out. I don't get it. I don't get it, Vic. No one's talking about that. No one's talking about that there are people that don't want public housing to exist. And
Right,
those
well,
are the people, that's our biggest challenge. Not so much the other people, it's the people that don't want. And we all know that there was a stigma on public housing residents. And we're just as hardworking, just as legal as anybody else. When I was on the community board, okay, the community board knew about all the issues that were going on in every development that is in CB7. Because I used to have a partner, Charles, okay, who came with me and we visited various locations and we saw the troubles and tried to address it. I don't know what happened after I left, but I can assure you, CB7 at one time was really engaged and knew what was going on in the public housing developments in CB7. And they were working very closely with us. That's all I have to say.
Victor, if I can just quickly address the last point, you know, I acknowledge there's definitely been some communication issues, and you know, moving forward, we do want to try to find ways to work more closely with you, with other tenant leaders, and also, you know, just get to know more about what's going on in our development. So happy to talk offline about how to do that.
Sure. I don't have a problem with that. There's a history going on there that no one's talking about how we got here. And that's the part that needs to be explained so that then you'll understand why the resistance, why the federal government is being fiscally responsible. But they want to get it on NYCHA. Did NYCHA make a mistake as well? Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, the taste that was left for broken promises. I got that. But we can't still live in that time. We have to move forward. We have to come up with a plan that works, because this is the way I look at it. If we do nothing, there will be no NYCHA. If we do nothing, there won't be any NYCHA. That might make some people happy, but I'm sure 450,000 residents may not like that. So we'll talk offline, Melissa. Okay? Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public or committee or board members about for Vic before we move on to committee discussion? All right, not seeing any. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Great seeing you all.
Very helpful and informative.
Very interesting session. Thanks.
Okay, I want to propose some next steps potentially, and you know, other members of the board, please jump in as well. To me, the two biggest takeaways and next steps were, one, thinking through pulling together a task force similar to the Fulton Houses Task Force or the Chelsea Working Group, and reaching out to our elected officials to help facilitate that. And two is speaking to our elected officials about the NYCHA Preservation Trust legislation at the state level.
And the federal money.
And federal funding, thank you.
We also have to examine the proposed legislation and prepare comments or criticisms.
Correct.
It seems to me that we should be making a statement with respect to the legislation, but because this really involves all the public housing in Community Board 7, we should try to coordinate some kind of a call with the TAs from all the NYCHA developments to get their input before the community board decides that it's for or against the proposed legislation.
Absolutely.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that, Jeanette. And, you know, we have our coalition, the Federal 8, and we meet. As a matter of fact, we're meeting tomorrow. So I'll bring that to the meeting and again, give you guys a tentative date where we can do that. I like the idea of lobbying, to be honest with you, our state legislative officials, as far as how we can include in that document resident management as an option. You know, there's language that, in my opinion, needs to be changed in that document. And the only way to do that again is to get the attention of those who will vote on this legislation, which is our elected officials. Okay, so I like to move in that direction. And Richard, I don't know if you're available, but you know, if we can talk offline, doesn't matter. You know, I would like to just throw some ideas in that direction.
Holly,
Yeah.
your groups can lobby. CB7 can only advocate.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying. I know that our group can lobby only, and that you can only advocate, but we can share information,
Absolutely.
Yes.
right? And we
Absolutely.
can get guidance, right? Because we are the advising entity.
I would appreciate a refresher on the NYCHA task force, because I never feel its presence. So that I would expect it to be part of the conversation at every interval, and I just don't feel that.
I want to
So
say something.
at some point, we could get a refresher, maybe at the next meeting, get 30 minutes devoted to what they do and what their role is in our current efforts, given, what we're learning, the updates we're getting on RAD, because I know that one of the things that they did and brought back some reasonable feedback was the trip to Boston. But on an ongoing basis, I don't see that they're engaged in every aspect of life.
I want to say something. That's not true. Every full board meeting, Roberta announced what we were doing. We had several town hall meetings. I didn't see everybody there. We met with Community Board 9. And then there was also something stated that when Victor was there was so much going on. When I joined the board, there was nothing going on with NYCHA. Nothing. I was asked to be the chair for the task force by Elizabeth Caputo. We were doing things. Whether or not people didn't participate, that is not my fault. I was also asked, let's get a task force. We've had Roberta, every full board meeting, she said something. She told about an event. It's been online. So there's a lot of misinformation here that we did nothing. We are doing nothing. We refreshed things. We had several people on the task force. I don't know where people who are speaking about the task force, those people didn't come. Now they're complaining that we should do more. I tried to get people to come. I'm offended, and this is the first time I'm speaking about it. We've had so many events. Certain board members chose not to participate. So that is not my fault.
Well, I'd like to feel the presence of the task force at each of our meetings. I guess that's the upshot of my comment, not so much criticizing, but I'd like to feel the task force, and I just don't. And I think that you want to, as a task force, you want to insert yourself into the entire solution and the intellection around NYCHA that occurs at each of our conversations, each of our meetings, and that's what's lacking.
Okay.
It's not about you.
Could I jump in for a second here?
Richard, hold on. I just want to quickly. Okay, let's not make this a referendum on the task force or what it's done or not done. Robert, your point is well taken in that I think we need to be more conscientious about making sure we're, including the task force in our planning and making NYCHA a key part of our work in the housing committee and the community board overall. Okay, Rich, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just really quickly. I was on the task force, and I know with the past year, all the turmoil, it's been hard to keep momentum. I think under Madeline's leadership on the task force, there were one really important finding, which is that there are three main issues with public housing that, if we could have an impact on those, it would be hugely important for the lives of people living in NYCHA. And those three issues were maintenance, security, and dealing with the trash. And I think that the more that we can get back to really focusing on those three issues, we can have a real impact on the community. So I think rather than looking back and seeing, what may or may not have happened with the task force, I think Madeline's leadership on just identifying those issues, and if we can have an impact there, we'd really be impacting people's lives.
So then, Rich, what are you proposing? And Madeline, what do you think? Is there those specific real issues to be developing some focus on them? Is that a possibility?
As I spoke about it before, Carmen brought this up. Every time we're complaining about the same things and NYCHA doesn't do anything about it. The reason that they don't do anything about it, as Carmen and others have said, they don't want to do anything about it. And that's what I've been speaking about. We have a new administration. Broadly, we should think more broadly. Like Victor was saying, maybe we shouldn't wait for the federal government. Okay, that's fine. But I believe that's the only way we're going to get out of this, because they're going to continue put band-aids on these things that they know they cannot fix because they don't have money. I think, like I just said earlier, each development in our district need to put a list of things together of what's needed in their development, find out the cost, present it to NYCHA or present it to us. We could all come together and do a proposal on that. But whereas we don't know what's coming, what's going, who's going to be the chair, we're walking blindly. And I don't do that. I don't walk blindly. We have to get more organized and figure out what we need to do going forward. Like Linka said, the councilwoman, she said, if you can't find a solution to that problem and that maybe that one issue, you try a different venue. But everybody's stuck on this one thing. We need to get a more of a conversation. Where are we as far as monies and what we can do as residents or tenant leaders? We keep going around in the same issues, just like Carmen said. I'm agree. Carmen and I don't get along, but she said something I agree with. We constantly talk about the same issues. We have to find a different way of dealing with this.
So do you think like a task force looking at the districts the developments in our district could be a helpful vehicle to do that if we are able to elevate voices from the respective developments to speak about their needs?
Right, like Absolutely. We do, district needs or something of that nature. But we have to have a money amount. We can't go to NYCHA and say, oh, we need repairs in this building, we need repairs in that building. They're gonna say, so what? We know that. Let's give them more concrete information that they cannot refuse or even want to negotiate with us on what we need.
So then respectfully, Madeline, could I just ask now that you listed some real, seem to me essential components. I mean, if you develop, and you've done so much of this, but if you develop your agenda, the list of needs, and if another step, I mean, I'm not completely tutored here, so please help me with it. If another step is for you all with help to be able to give dollar amounts or estimates. I see you nodding, and I'm very glad.
Yes.
Because I'm trying to help. So dollar amounts for those needs, because you all have been working and do have clarity on the list of needs.
Right.
And so if we can then be helping in terms of putting some dollar amounts on it, it seems to me that there's at least a step on the Upper West Side in the NYCHA housings to be developing a focused district agenda and need created by the residents.
Perfect.
Okay, so if that can, and you've got the components and ingredients, if that can be formulated, we all know that this federal government may give us some hope. However, the federal government has a lot on its plate now. We know that in terms of everything that I don't have to repeat of the economy and the pandemic. But they could be getting to it, and you should be ready, preparing it so that you're there in the door, and that the Board 7, which after all has so many NYCHA buildings and thousands of residents, that this could be something that has maybe some legs. Because you've been doing a lot of the work. We got the components. Maybe we could fashion it.
Exactly.
I mean, I see you nodding, and it gives me.
Thank you, Ethel.
Okay, good. Thank you, Madeline. I appreciate that. I'd like to be able to help.
Cynthia, do you want to say something? Apologies for the.
Yes, first and foremost, the one main reason, and all of us have been stating this, Article 8, is that CB7 up until recently didn't even know who all the NYCHA presidents under their umbrella were. And that's because the task force since day one didn't set up a simple database where it had names of presidents, emails, and phone numbers. That's something that was very simple that should have been instituted since day one. Number two, you don't always need a money factor to get common repairs done. NYCHA gets 30 million a week through HUD. They have capital money that is given weekly to get repairs done. But because they won't pay for it and they won't do the repairs unless residents bring in the media, that's why repairs go so long and don't get done. We don't need to say, okay, we need X amount of money to get pipes fixed or to get the floors done, or if someone's ceiling falls in. We are not contractors. It is not our jobs to come up with how much a contractor charges to get a ceiling fixed. That is money that NYCHA already has. So that should be a common sense approach on doing repairs. As well as Cambridge was done, New York City cannot be compared to Cambridge, Massachusetts. We are on a much bigger scale. And while Ocean Bay is great, what people didn't realize is that the windows don't work. They look beautiful, they don't work. The radiators are great and brand new, they leak. So unless you know the specifics behind how great it is, it doesn't work. All right, it's a cosmetic upgrade. Wise Towers was promised brand new bathrooms. It has now been scaled back to bath fitters. That's unacceptable. That's placing plastic over new tubs. That's not right. And CB7 doesn't know this because you're not communicating with us. You have got to pick up the pace and start communicating with all of us respectfully. And then things will get done. We have all kind of issues going on over here, and you guys don't even know half of them because you don't communicate with us. And
Cynthia, you were on the task force, so why did you speak up when you were on the?
Let's not crosstalk like this, please.
Task force. Never. I showed up to the task force meetings. I was never invited. I was never included, Roberta. The only thing Madeline wanted me to do was write letters for her. So since you don't want us bashing your board members, don't ask me questions on a public forum that you really don't want to hear.
Okay, Cynthia, I don't know, perhaps like myself or Louisa or, both of us could attend some federal aid meetings. I do really want us to get better at communicating. I hear you. I'm open to suggestions.
You have to be open. You have to stop blocking us out. Okay, NYCHA does not revolve around one person on your board. Okay, the task force is never going to work until Madeline communicates fairly with all of us.
Let me say something. I'm tired of being attacked. And every time you come on, you attack me for no reason. Stop. I am not going to be attacked from you anymore.
That's the statement.
Melissa, if I can suggest something, I'd like to submit to you, maybe some of the others would. I have a particular interest in a task for the task force that we should send to you. You sort them out, share them with Roberta and Madeline, and give them, from our point of view, ideas that could add to the work they've done and to where we're going with respect to resolving the NYCHA issues. so that, so you would develop, you would be the a little bit of a kind of a email think tank, so that instead of a group meeting and that sort of thing where nothing gets finalized, no ideas get, you can't much move an idea along. So I'd like to send at least what I have in mind to you, and then leave it with you and to share with the rest.
Please do. I'm happy to receive them. Cynthia, others, please, let's not attack any board members. We really do want to be working with you, but it's harder to do that one in this kind of essential relationship.
I'm not going to take it anymore.
Listen, I like to, Madam, can I jump in here a minute?
Sure, Steve.
Brown.
It's an attack. Why is that?
Let's all tone this down a bit, because everyone cares about what we're talking about. And clearly there is, we have risen some tensions, and let's take the rhetoric down a bit. I think everyone wants to accomplish something. It'd be great to move forward. I'm the new chair, so I can only say that it's a new day. Cynthia, I received an email from you. I hope you received my response that I'd be eager to set up a meeting with you and to understand
the federal challenges. Meet with you, and that way you could hear all of our ideas at one time.
Great. So let's set up that meeting. I want to, go ahead, but I hope you got that email. And if it's yourself or others, I'd be more than interested in hearing your thoughts moving forward.
Okay.
And if the public cannot respect members, which I've been respectful
Madeline,
all this time, they shouldn't be allowed. I'm not going to be attacked all the time.
Madeline, to Madeline's point, we don't want to be directing any of our comments at individuals. We're all very passionate. Madeline's very passionate. Whatever's been going on, let's rise above pointing the finger, and let's just leave it at that. I could see Madeline's emotional. I want to support you, Madeline. I know you're very, very passionate about what you do.
And I'm not emotional.
I can see you're upset.
Disappointed that I'm being attacked all the time.
I can see you're upset, and we're all supporting you, and we're going to take care of this moving forward. But I would ask that we pivot, we move forward. Cynthia, we'll set something up. We'll make this a constructive manner. The point of this was to bring, a very important topic, and that's why we're all here. And at least we all have that in common. Okay?
Yep.
So I'm just hoping that we can move forward on this particular call in a positive manner from this point on.
Thank you.
Okay? I want to hand this back to Melissa, who's doing a very good job keeping this together. And we will continue on. Back to you, Melissa.
Thanks. Carmen, did you want to make a comment? And please, again, let's all keep it policy focused and not individual focused.
I would like to say that this task force that you guys have, I would love to work with anyone on that task force. Please let me know if I can be helpful, because I really think that we all need to start getting together, because this is not going to move if we don't become one body. Okay, and so whatever I can do to help, we should get enough presidents on this task force, because that's the only way it's really going to work. The presidents need to be, helping on that task force also. We should be present also. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. And I do agree. We're helped by having more tenants involved and leaders. Mona Lisa, would you like to make a comment?
Well, hello. I want to welcome Steve Brown. This is my first time attending the meeting with him, with the board there. And like you talked about moving forward, I am from the Federal 8, Stephen. We've been doing this for more than 10 years as a group. I would like to see or hear or be able to be more involved in the community board meetings with my other colleagues who are here today speaking as well. And yes, the way to communicate is by having the information so that we'll be able to share and network with the information that we receive. So moving forward and starting a new beginning, and to continue with these meetings, and to know that we will not be left out, you know, in the dark, because we do participate. I've been pretty active in the community for a long time. I've been living here at the Dome Site Development. It's already going to be 25 years this month. We moved here in 1996, and we have many problems also. We're the sister of Wise Towers. And we're under a private management, and it's not really working so well. So we're not under no RAB or no Section 8 or anything like that. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that that doesn't come over here. I sit with my other colleagues to support everything that they talk about as a community leader, and they support me as well. And so let's move forward. And the only way that we're going to participate and be able to hear what you have to say so you can hear us is by getting those emails, like Cynthia said. And we've always been here and always been available. So there's no blame to that. And I just wanted to say, welcome, Steve, and let's make things better, okay? With the support of the community board.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you, Melissa.
Yeah, we're happy to talk, you know, offline or online about the best kind of beyond these meetings, the best structure, whether it's having a liaison from the CB at your meetings or otherwise. Happy to think it through.
Yeah, one more thing. Yeah, we have given plenty of concrete information about the things that we've needed in each development, and we deal with the Amsterdam houses, we deal with the Hostess, the Wise, Douglas Rehab, also Douglas when Jane was there as well. Now, fortunately, we have Carmen over there, who's been a big advocate for the tenants over at Douglas. You're fortunate to have her. They need a voice like that. And we have many developments within the Wise. We just want to move forward already and make things happen, you know, and create that task force that we need, because we do have housing issues. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Well, I think one thing I'm hearing a lot of agreement on is that a working group / task force of some kind to focus on these issues would be helpful. So I think that would be our most concrete next step, is thinking through how to form that.
Melissa, this is Jeanette. But regardless, for the timing of the community board's comments on the legislation, maybe we should try to coordinate that meeting with the TA chairs quickly. It sounds like Polly's gonna introduce it to the 8, but then maybe we could reach out to the others. Should we assume housing takes the lead on that?
I think so. I think we're happy to be like the conduit or platform.
Let's get on that task force and get that bitch out of there. Yeah.
Muted. Okay. So.
Was I just called a bitch? How are you allowing these people?
Madeline, I'm sorry. I don't want anyone to be disrespectful. Please, no one speak disrespectfully to anyone on the committee. If you do so.
And people wonder why I don't want to work. I'm not going to be insulted. I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not going to be threatened, which I have been by certain individuals who's talking. Enough.
Madeline, again, Madeline, and I apologize. I misheard what you said. Madeline, you don't need to defend yourself. There is no room. Madeline, I'll defend you. There is no room for that conversation. And I thought I heard something else, but clearly I heard something else. You know,
let's get that bitch out of there. That's what was said on the task force. That's what I heard.
Well, I think you're correct, and I misheard that.
This is what I'm talking about. Why we deal with them? You gonna offend me? I am angry.
Madeline, again, I'm just going to try and help out the meeting, and we're going to have a conversation about things that are said. That's a completely inappropriate thing that was said. We're trying to move forward. I thought we were inches from a positive situation. Melissa, my suggestion is we move forward from these topics. But, you know, I can say one thing. I have a lot of belief in Madeline. She's very passionate about the way she does stuff. She's very passionate about the things that she works on. I believe that she has done everything she believes she can and has worked hard. And if people disagree with that, that happens sometimes. But I don't think you should look at somebody's integrity and what they believe in. And I believe in Madeline Innocent. I think what she's done has been very impressive, and I support her. Now, people can disagree about something, but there's no reason to have a name calling. There's no reason to have these conversations. And personalities really shouldn't play a part in these Zooms. And we're not going to have certain people moving forward involved if they're going to talk like that. And we're not going to talk about that anymore. But I know that every single person on this community board supports Madeline Innocent, and I do. And, you know, and that's what we're all going to agree upon. And if we're going to work together, there's no reason to be using names such as that. So
Thank you, Stephen.
Welcome. Melissa, my suggestion is we wrap up this topic. Okay?
Yeah, I mean,
I think we're done here.
Yeah, we have to wrap up this topic. I'm saddened that this got to such a disrespectful place and that, you know, we couldn't talk this out, but let's.
Because this happens at every meeting. This happens. These two harass me and attack.
Madeline, let's rise above. I ask that we just move on. I'm asking that we can move on. And it's time to move on from this particular topic, and we'll discuss how to frame these moving forward. But we're not going to have this in a future meeting. Go ahead, Melissa. I suggest we just close this topic. If there's some other things to discuss, let's do so.
Okay. Unfortunately, I think we have to move on, and I think we'll have to pick this up at a future meeting because I don't feel like we really reached a resolution. But for now, I just want to
constructive criticism.
What?
Sorry, I didn't hear that, but I'm going to actually ask that attendees not speak for the moment as we're going to move on to some agenda planning items.
Okay. Wait, Melissa, we want to hear from Kimberly Newman.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I've been waiting.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Kimberly, please.
That's okay. You can still hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I did just want to, I was not trying to spearhead the committee for 100 Freedom Place South, but we wanted to register and give an update to the situation that we've been having here. I don't know that anyone has done that. And since this building was approved as a pour door, you know, I know that term's not used anymore, but we were the last pour door building. We've been having a myriad of issues. The biggest one that I'm most concerned about is security, which goes back to what several people were discussing. Security and maintenance are two of the top issues for people living in buildings like this. But my biggest concern, I'm a single woman, and there have been issues. The front door intercom and video has been out for over 5 weeks now. Again, we have complained repeatedly. They say they're going to fix it, but it has been a situation where people can just walk into this building and they wander around, they're in the halls. I've been followed off the elevator and harassed. We've had homeless people in the lobby. We've had homeless people in the stairwells. We've had people partying in the stairwells. And it's just incredibly distressing, especially because this was something, the pour door acquiescence was made that it will be no different. They'll have a first-class experience, and that's not what we've been experiencing at all. So we are trying, I see Roberta waving her hand. Yes, I will absolutely reach out to you. But we are struggling to figure out what to do here. We are just starting to organize. We got a WhatsApp going on, but there have been assaults. I'm now carrying mace to go to the laundry room when I'm in the building, and that's just not okay.
Kimberly, are you at 1 Riverside Center?
No, I'm at 100 Freedom Place South, which was 10 Freedom Place South. Right. We're really struggling and we just don't know what to do. And I was trying to be in charge, but it looks like I'm getting there.
So 100 Riverside South was one of the last buildings to get
100 Freedom Place, sorry.
100 Freedom Place was one of the last buildings.
Yes.
Part of Riverside South. It's part of Euler. It wasn't supposed to have a pour door, but it did. And I think it behooves us to do everything in our power to make sure that this is corrected. Have you been in touch with the 20th precinct?
From what I have heard, we had a Zoom call with some of the tenants last week. From what I have heard, there have been repeated, I mean, like they're literally getting calls all the time. And so I'm just not sure what to do, but it sucks that I'm feeling insecure.
There is a restrictive deck. Is it still in operation? I think, Richard, are you?
The deck is, we're
Yes.
allowed up there sometimes, but the deck is, that's supposed to be where we share space. And that has also been an issue. Just things have not been good. They've not been maintained well. Things are pretty dirty. There are several floors that look terrible. The elevator has a broken floor with a taped over piece of cardboard and duct tape. And
have you been in contact with any of the elected officials?
We have started, yes. Somebody spoke to Helen Rosenthal, I believe it was. Somebody had a contact there and they started that last week. But I just need help. I don't know what to do. So I'm wide open to anyone that would like to help us figure out.
Kimberly, if you reach out to me tomorrow,
okay,
I will be glad to. I mean, this is CB7 had a restrictive deck. It was supposed to be affordable housing. You were one of the last buildings to get affordable housing.
Right.
And this is just unconscionable.
It's not been a good situation and I'm very distressed. I feel like we need a security guard. I know that was probably not in the initial plans, but it's a free-for-all. We have no one to go to. We've been sold 3 times since we were approved. This is our 3rd management company or owner, and we never know who to talk to. We never know what to do. People can't get things fixed, and it's just
the current owner.
Melissa, Doug's been raising his hand.
Yeah, I see that there too. Open to any help.
Who is the current owner?
Well, right now it's Pan Am is our management company. I don't know. We were just literally sold a 3rd time. I've had to change who I pay my rent to 3 times now. So it's Pan Am Equities, I guess, is who is currently. We had Halstead before, and then there was someone else before that. But the reality is things are getting stolen all the time from our mail room. We had somebody had to stop people from walking out with the furniture in our lobby the other day. And, so we're really, really frustrated and need some help. And I'm
Doug, you had your hand up, Doug.
Yeah. Doug was messaging me too. So please.
Right. So first of all, a lot of the things that you're describing, Roberta's absolutely right. There's a restrictive covenant, but that's beside the point. What you are describing are potential violations of the warranties of the right of habitability. I'm not an attorney, but I will tell you that any landlord that rents any space in New York has to make sure that the tenants are safe. An open door is a violation. There are many other things. Elevator, you're describing a lot of things. So you don't need any special privileges to make complaints on 311. Absolutely. Form a tenant association. Cindy, who I was messaging, actually works at Helen's office. She's going to see if she can find you a kind of a simple how to form a tenant association, but I'm sure that Helen's office, Linda's office, Gail's office will be able to help you. Reach out to your elected officials, document everything. That is incidents, photographs, videos, everything you can, and put pressure, because a lot of the things you're describing are absolutely within your right and a right of any tenant, whether you are a market or subsidized tenant, it doesn't matter, they're violations.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I strongly urge you to form a tenant association. You have power in numbers. Squeaky wheels get the grease. You are here tonight. Everybody's hearing you. There are elected officials or their representatives on this meeting.
We wanted this in public record for that reason, and that's why we hung in there for 2 hours.
And you,
Kimberly, I didn't want to give you my email over the call, but
I put mine in the chat, but
All right, I'll email you then.
So Rosalba from the Borough President's office just sent you a message. Check the chat, Kimberly. You'll see a lot of people are responding to you right now.
So I'm gonna just, as Chair, I'm gonna step in here for a second. Elected official representatives, whoever's on the call, if you could either message her directly on the chat or she shared her email, please do so. You know, we're happy to try to connect you directly with the elected officials' offices. Please keep us updated.
Kimberly, your email.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Roberta?
I didn't see your email.
Oh, it's Kimberly@kdnewman.com. It was up in the
KD Newman.
NEUMANN.com. And I'm happy to start getting involved because I mean, I'm walking through the halls scared, and that's not okay. We apparently had a stabbing in a stairwell that was reported to the police, and we have open doors that people block open.
No, I don't think we can wait till you have a tenants association. I think we have to take action tomorrow.
Okay,
I will email
any help
you tomorrow.
Rosalba Rodriguez has given you her number in the chat. She works for the borough president, so she's reaching out to you directly on here as well, Kimberly.
Fantastic. I will write that down. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, please keep us updated.
If I could just say real quickly, I had a lot of problems in my building. That's how I first got involved with the community board, forming a tenant association. And Rosalba Rodriguez is your secret weapon. You should really take advantage of that opportunity. Reach out.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I will send her an email immediately.
She's very good and she's scary effective.
Good, because I'm not. So anyone that can help me with that is great.
All right, moving on.
Thank you. I just wanted to get that on record that this is what has been going on because we didn't think anyone had reported what has been happening at 100 Freedom Place South, and it's just gotten to be a free-for-all, and we need some help on this situation because we're definitely being treated kind of like the bastard children of 1 West End Avenue, which is not okay. So thank you for your help.
Yeah, thanks for hanging in there through the few hours.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I just like to close with just discussing upcoming meetings. I circulated a list of topics that we had discussed in our January meeting with, people who had expressed interest in taking the lead. I think I might make some modifications to that list based on offline conversations I've had about who's interested in what. So I'm going to recirculate that with some notes. I think in February, I would like to revisit a lot of the discussions from tonight. I don't know, Louisa, any updates you want to provide on your end around the topics?
Well, we were thinking of doing collegiate next month.
Well, the problem.
Maybe we could do both.
We haven't heard back from HPD, so without HPD, we can't really.
Okay, so let's put that on pause for now, and I'm going to engage some other committee members to also work on that since Roberta's not technically on the committee.
Okay.
Just to supplement your efforts, which I do appreciate. Sorry,
okay, perhaps we could set up a structure to meet with NYCHA TAs and figure out how we are going to advocate once we determine exactly if we're in concert with each other.
Yeah, let's talk offline with them about what format they should take. Like who should go to what? Does that sound okay?
All right, so as I said, we're having a meeting tomorrow, so I'll bring it, to the meeting because there are other resident leaders who are not on this Zoom meeting tonight, such as Sandra Thomas, Amsterdam Houses, etc. So Louisa, Melissa, I'll let them know basically some of the dialogue that has transpired as far as the trust and other issues that we discussed to get feedback from them as well. And the fact that, we want to move forward to have some kind of session so that you can get information from them.
That'd be great.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, then with that, I'm going to bring our meeting to a close. That's okay. I'm going to adjourn us.
Thank you, Melissa.
All right, thank you all.
Melissa.
Bye.
Stay well, Madeline.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.